Welcome to the Lafaya podcast, the podcast for people who refuse to fold in the face of adversity. Whether you're navigating personal challenges or professional obstacles, this show is a reminder that you have the power to play to win. Welcome back, everybody. I'm super excited about the guests I'll have this month. If you don't know, October is ADHD Awareness Month, and I had to pay tribute to that and bringing in some of my favorites that I've met with before, but some of my favorites, they have such a wealth of information that I know you'll benefit from it, whether or not you're diagnosed with ADHD. Most people at least know someone who is, or maybe have specific symptoms. Maybe they're not diagnosed, but this information is so valuable. It may even help to identify someone who maybe you weren't sure, whether or not they were ADHD, were fit for the ADHD diagnosis. you know, It'll help you to like figure out or to maybe help them out and say, hey, maybe you should get tested. Okay. But anyway, without any further ado, Meredith, I'm going to have you introduce your wonderful self to my wonderful my wonderful audience.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm so excited for this conversation. My name is Meredith Carder. I live in the Phoenix, Arizona area with my husband and three kids. I am an ADHD coach, creator, and author. My first book came out last year called It All Makes Sense Now. Embrace Your ADHD Brain to Live a Creative and Colorful Life. You can find that anywhere books are sold if you're interested. And I also create content on Instagram under the handle of hummingbird underscore ADHD. And I write frequently on Substack as well.
Awesome. Okay, so you have a new book out. Can you tell us a little bit about like what was the motivation behind the book and what people can expect from your book?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So, when my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD many, many years ago now, I found myself really questioning whether I had ADHD or not. Suddenly, under that lens of ADHD, a lot of the struggles I had in my life started to make more sense.
Yes.
And I had a really hard time during that period finding information that really resonated with me. Again, this was several years ago. There's lots of excellent books that have come out in the meantime, but most of the things I was finding were written to help parents parent their children with ADHD, and I definitely needed help with that. But I wanted a book that talked about the lived experience of being diagnosed with ADHD later in life, or really just understanding ADHD better later in life.
Yes.
And I couldn't find that at the time. So I really focused my book on combining some of my lived experiences with actionable strategies and exercises people could do to help them explore how to make their ADHD brain work for the life in front of them.
Very nice. Oh, very cool. Okay, so as you know, my podcast is all about kind of sharing your pain to power story and maybe even some strategies for how to get through some of those tough moments where you just like, emotions are strong, maybe something has kicked in and you just need to kind of battle through it. But can you talk to the audience a little bit about like some of your pain story, some of your pain and what kind of led you to, where you are today?
Yeah, I can talk about that. Please cut me off if I ramble too long because there's so many of those pain stories from my past.
Okay.
I was that child that did pretty well in school because I was pretty interested in learning. ADHD brains are activated by interest versus importance.
Yep.
So, as long as my teacher was engaging and the subject matter was something that was interesting to me, I did pretty well. There were a few subjects I did not do so well in. One of those was math. So I really never learned how to study because I could retain the information that I was interested in. And then I got to college And I had been told about how much potential I had as a kid and how I would do so well. And it was a different ball game. I continued to do well in my psychology courses that I took because that was really interesting to me. But I continued trying to pass the one college math class I needed to take to get my degree. So, I kept taking college algebra, kept dropping it in the first 6 weeks because I was behind and I didn't know how to get support. And by the time I graduated, I still hadn't taken that class, and they let me walk at graduation, but I still had to do that course for summer school, which I did. I went to community college. I got tutoring every single day to get a C in that class to pass. And so that all ended well, right?
Yes.
But I didn't call the school and get it put on my transcripts. So it never posted that I graduated from college because I
Oh,
needed that one class. And I forgot all about it until a job wanted to verify my degree. So that was a very hard conversation I had to have with that person that had hired me. I had a lot of shame around the fact that one, I had this thing hanging on that I didn't complete, and two, that I just didn't navigate that process. It didn't feel like a good enough excuse to just say, I forgot, and this didn't feel important at the time. So that's just
right.
one story about how I felt like I could do things that other people found hard, but I couldn't do the things other people found easy. And it held
Mm.
me back in so many areas of my life.
Now, did you ever run into, I mean, I think that it was quite fortunate that you were interested in education in general. Okay, so that because that's not always the case. Like we have those out there who maybe they just have very specific areas of interest
Mhm.
and all of the rest of school is kind of more like something that they just fail, right? And then people are out there more judging them, saying, "Well, if you can do it here, why can't you do it there?" You know,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about like because I feel like it's something that's often extremely misunderstood because and the truth is yes the ability is there, right? The what did you call it, that they said you had lots of promise or potential. There it is. The
Hmm.
potential's there, right? But sometimes getting over that gap, you know, getting crossing over to that kind of area of ability can be very tough. Can you talk a little bit about like some of the strategies? I heard you speak to tutoring, but are there any other strategies that you've used to kind of help bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think that's what's really important to understand when there is something that someone is struggling with, that before we can really identify a good strategy, we have to really understand what the actual barrier is. And so
Yes.
often we think it's something around, having the brain power to do it, or we think it's motivation or
Motivation.
desire. So you really have to get into understanding why this is hard before you
Yes.
can really determine the way, excuse me, the way forward. So I usually, when I'm working with clients, talk about what is the thing that you're trying to do that is hard, but we have to figure out why it's hard first. And for people with ADHD, a lot of us struggle with executive functions.
Yes.
So for people not familiar with what that means, those are a set of cognitive processes that the prefrontal cortex of your brain is in charge of. So some of them include like prioritization, some of them include pacing, self-regulation, things like that. So if we can't identify what it is that's stopping us, we're gonna pick the wrong strategy out of the book in the first place.
Perfect. Oh my goodness. Okay, so that is so perfect what you just spoke to because people need to identify what the real issues are. And often, as you said, it is not lack of motivation or other words that people use like laziness or those things that are basically self-esteem crushing, by the way, when people assume, because sometimes we have those out there who they really do want to do well. They really do have a desire, but there are barriers, there are things in the way. And again, usually that speaks against the whole idea of it being a motivation thing if they really truly want it and just can't quite get there. Like I sometimes it's I don't know why I can't get there, you know. And then when you start to explore ideas like executive functioning issues and you start to understand what that means and you know and how to overcome some of those barriers um like that procrastination for one, right, that struggling to know where to start can be a huge issue. But a person, if they're not educated, they won't recognize that that's what the real issue is. It's not that they're not motivated, no motivated, even though sometimes they'll say, well, I don't, well, sometimes it's just I don't feel like it, you know. You know, I don't want to. But most of the time that comes from the fact that when they do try to get started, there's just no right, there's no beginning, you know, place to start. So you know, when people have certain, like, what are some of the most common executive functioning issues that you see, and let's just say one or two, right, the most common, and how do you coach people through that?
Yeah, so like I'll touch on what you just talked about with a struggle to initiate tasks. Oftentimes, task initiation can be really hard for people. And figuring out that block is really important. But oftentimes, if the block is I don't know where to start, we have to identify, is this project too big? Is there not a clear path of tasks? We might need help breaking it down. So
Yes.
oftentimes someone is given a project, but because we're struggling with understanding what the priority is to do first, our
Yes.
brain just kind of goes into that freeze mode. So we get overwhelmed and we kind of shut down. So oftentimes people don't recognize that they're not starting because they don't have the path. They recognize that they feel overwhelmed or they feel kind of frozen, but they don't know that the next step might be processing with someone. What are the things that need to get done to get this project done? What information is missing for me that's causing me to stay stuck right now?
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Yes, I love that. Just really learning how to break things down into, you know, those bite-sized pieces can be an extreme help. Like, and bite-sized pieces could mean like what you said, checking in with someone, really, you know, and getting an understanding. Okay, what would be required of me next, right, in order to get moving with this project? Because sometimes oftentimes that's what's needed. Okay, so that task initiation, you say it so much more eloquently than I do. Getting started. No, and what's another area, just one other, that you know that you kind of commonly see with ADHD, and how do you coach through that?
Something that I see a lot is struggles with working memory. So, your working memory is kind of similar to short-term memory, but it's not the same. I like to describe working memory as like a scratch pad where you're writing down the steps of what comes next to do a kind of shorter term task. So, like even a task like walking into your kitchen to make a cup of coffee, you're writing down, walk into the kitchen, open the cabinet, get the grounds of the coffee out. It doesn't seem that complicated, right? But I like to compare an ADHD brain to a neurotypical brain, where the neurotypical brain has like a normal scratch pad and like what they write down for the steps stays there in their working memory. Where with
Yes.
ADHD, it's like we have a scratch pad with like disappearing ink. So we might have thought through those steps, but we're not holding on to them. So we might walk into the kitchen and we don't know why we're there. Or we open the cabinet and we see something else that takes our attention. So we forget that we were in the kitchen to make the cup of coffee and we end up doing something completely different. And this
Yes.
can, yeah, this happens all the time. It can be
Yes.
very frustrating. It can take us off task. And really just delay our processing through things. I think in the workforce, this can look like we have to reset our email password. And so that usually you got to go into your email. You go into your email, you see something else. You forgot that you were in your email in the first place to reset that password. So it's a tough one. It doesn't always work perfectly. But something that I think really helps is sometimes to just narrate out loud as you go. I'm walking into the kitchen to get my cup of coffee. Your
Yes.
family might be like, what is this lady doing over here? But that's
Yes.
okay. They'll learn. Or if you're in the office setting and you're not comfortable saying it out loud, like writing down what you're doing. Like I keep a scratch pad, like I literally have one right here, and I will write down, I'm resetting my password. You don't have to write down every single step because your brain does know the steps. But when I find myself in my email and then I'm like, how did I get here? What am I
Why am
doing in
I
my
here?
email? I can reference that really quick. So kind of setting up steps like that are very helpful. Another
Yes.
thing that I find it can mess up your routines. Like getting ready in the morning can be tough with working memory because like our brains are so creative and so interested that when we're doing kind of those like rote tasks that are supposed to be pretty intuitive, like putting our makeup on and wearing deodorant and things like that, we might be like thinking about something over here. We might be like planning our next business. I don't know what we're doing, but we're
Yes.
not really like thinking about those steps. So I think it can be really helpful to put all of your items to get ready in like two baskets, and everything stays on the left until you physically move it over. So you have that visual cue of, okay, these things have gotten done now. And that can help a lot with multi-step routines and be applied in different ways.
Oh my goodness, that's such awesome advice. The scratch pad and the old basket on the left, I'm going to apply. So actually, I kind of do the scratch pad thing. One of the things that because my this is it's so true. It really does happen. My husband literally he tells me my name should be Ooh Squirrel because I'm so like Ooh Squirrel. I'm so easily distracted by anything. And that speaking things out loud in front of people who won't think you're a crazy person for it, speaking things out loud. Okay, I'm going to open my phone now and do this. If I didn't do that, half the time I would remember what the heck I opened the phone the tele the, I mean the cell phone telephone. Ooh, I'm going back. The phone for. Like I'll say it out loud. My husband did not initially believe me when I would do this. I would say, oh, okay, let me call so and so. I'd open the phone, gone. And 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 my husband, I'm like, what was I doing? My husband's like, are you serious? Like, back years ago, are you serious? I was like, yes. Oh, you said you were going to do this. Oh yeah, thank you. Right after, now he's accustomed to it. Now I say it out loud, and I'll have this. I don't even have said the words out loud. I'll have this confused look on my face, and he'll be like, "You're going to call so thank you, honey." Right? But
I love that.
this is something that can be so powerful for relationships too, because it can be really tough to be in different relationships when when you're struggling with issues like this, because people will think sometimes that you don't care when you forget, like, or you only care about yourself, you only think about the things that matter to you, right? And that can happen also with being able to do well in areas of interest, like being able to perform well when you're in an area of hyper focus. It can be really a great thing. That's like an ADHD strength because hyper focus, right? But when it comes to remembering other things that maybe other people may want or things that are important to them, it's not that it's not important. It's that it just the brain doesn't hold the stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think
And
it
so
really is. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to touch on your point about relationships
Yes.
because so much of understanding your ADHD brain is so that you can communicate to the people around you why things are the way they are. I remember as a kid, my parents were like, Meredith always talks to herself. So I was accommodating my working memory even as a child, but people were like, oh, that's weird. Why are you talking to yourself? And it was kind of this cute little joke. But then I internalized that as I got older of like, oh, it's weird to talk to myself. I shouldn't be doing this. And I lost a tool that could really help me. And so now that I understand ADHD better, I had to have those conversations with my husband, being like, I'm going to be saying stuff out loud. I'm not usually asking you for help. My husband's such a helper that if I say something like out loud, he might be like trying to jump in and give me a solution when I don't need a solution in the moment. I'm just saying this so I can hold on to what I'm doing. I don't need you to help me with the thing. I just need to remember I'm doing the thing. But being able to explain that to him is really helpful for our dynamic because then he's not, I'm not mad at him for always trying to like do everything for me, and he's not feeling overburdened. He just knows what's going on here. And I think that helps a lot. And especially with those stories we start to tell ourselves, you mentioned people might think you're not not careful. I think careless is something that I know I heard a lot
Yes.
throughout my life. I think ADHD people hear that often, and it's so frustrating because we care a lot often. We
Yes.
know that there's an impact, but if we don't understand like what working memory even is, or some of the other executive functions we struggle with, then we can start to believe those stories that we're careless and we really don't care enough.
Yes. Yeah, and it can become really tough. It, the reason that I absolutely love the idea of, this particular podcast, playing the hand that you're dealt, is because sometimes going through situations like that where people really don't understand you, and actually sometimes you really don't understand yourself, right?
Hmm.
Um, it can really just cause us to kind of fall victim to our circumstance. And my biggest goal is to help people learn how to become empowered through their circumstance, to be able to tell yourself it's okay for me to be this way, or it's okay for this situation, because we need to tell ourselves that it's okay because the situation is what it is. So it's okay for the situation to be what it is. Here's what I'm going to do to help myself out, or here's what I'm going to
Hmm.
do to help the situation out, is a huge way to not only build up your self-esteem, but also keep you from just having this constant state of just kind of being stressed out, and what I call having that red alert brain, where you're just like hyper in tune to every piece of negative stimuli, and falling apart
Hmm.
easily. I really want to help people to understand how to take what was considered a something that limited them, or worked against them, and make that thing work for you, you know
Yeah.
or
Yeah, you
find a way to work
can't.
it.
I love that because you really can't accommodate what you don't understand.
Right.
And that's what I think a lot of people with ADHD struggle with is they're struggling with these things. They know they're struggling with things. They know they're having a hard time like being on time, or they lose things, or they're aware of those struggles. But the typical advice to overcome them doesn't always work for people with ADHD. But when you understand your struggles better, then you can be empowered to use the appropriate accommodations to be able to live in a more comfortable way. So I love
Yes.
that messaging around like, yeah, these struggles are so real. They don't go away when you're diagnosed with ADHD, or depending on what struggle we're talking about, it's not always going to be something that we fix. It doesn't need to be fixed, but our ways of existing in the world can be so much more comfortable for us when we know how to accommodate our brain.
Yeah, so it just not working on, not wishing a thing away, right? But more embracing and understanding it first and foremost. Once you have an understanding, problem solving on what can I do to just, perform at my best level, even with this challenge, or you can call it
Exactly.
a challenge, whatever you want to call it, because I guess a challenge is the appropriate word, because it's not a disability. You're not unable. It just you know what I mean. It creates a situation where you need to think a little differently, you need to behave a little differently. If you don't have your own memory for things, then maybe everything goes into the calendar, and alarms. I have to set alarms for every single thing, even if it's in my calendar and I know it's coming. If I look at it 30 minutes, an hour before, I need the alarm to tell me in 10 minutes till. I need the alarm to tell me 30 minutes until, 10 minutes until, 5 minutes until, because I will get distracted that fast.
Mhm, and that's the thing is a lot of times, like, these are simple things we can do to accommodate it, but we don't think we should need that, right? Most
Right.
people don't think they need that many reminders, but we can remember and forget again so quickly. I actually literally just wrote about this exact kind of scenario on my Substack last week, where I had an appointment and I was like, I know I'm going to forget this appointment because it is a weird time of day. It's not something I typically would have an appointment for.
Right.
And I like remembered and forgot. And I even remembered to like set that alarm when I was out running errands. I'm like, oh, I really feel like I'm going to forget this one. Let's set another alarm. And I still snoozed the alarm because I was hyper focused on something.
Yep.
And so, even with those accommodations, I think we still have to have like grace and patience with ourselves too, that like, this is just sometimes going to be a challenge and it's going to sometimes have some ramifications, but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try different things, that we shouldn't problem solve, and we shouldn't continue to believe in ourselves that we
Yes.
can do these things.
Yes. And when, you know, maybe something falls through the cracks, then giving yourself grace is the most wonderful thing you can do for yourself. When you learn how to give yourself grace, you actually teach others how to do the same. So when you give yourself grace, then you have enough to give to others, right? What we don't give, if we don't give it to ourselves, then we're going to be impatient with others. And then when we see them having some of the same issues, we're going to be hard on them like we are on ourselves. But if we
Mhm.
learn how to have that grace for ourselves, we'll be able to extend it to others. And that's kind of passing it on to them to be able to extend it back to us when we need it.
Yeah, that is such a powerful point. I really do think we have to work on that piece of that self-reflection and self-trust and grace because it's such a ripple effect. Have so many stories from my past when I was trying to be a perfectionist mom and my kids were little, and I would judge the heck out of myself for
Yes.
any little thing I felt like I was doing wrong. And then I was
Yep.
judging other mothers too, but that was really about me, not about
Yep.
them.
Yep. I would call myself so many names. I was, say things that I didn't, we don't pay attention to our words. Like I'm, so stupid. Like, how could you possibly forget this? And how could you possibly do this? And how could you possibly do and now I no longer do that to myself. It's like, well, honestly, I gave it the good old, I gave it the good old effort. I put in 3 alarms, my brain still went somewhere else.
It
I'll get it next.
happens.
I'll get it next time because each time that happens, it just teaches me, okay, follow the alarms, do it immediately, even if I'm in an area of interest or whatever, a distraction. If yeah, I can't get there, once the alarm goes off, it's just like, oh nope, I have to go here. If I don't go here, then it'll leave me, right? And so,
Mhm.
but thank you so much, Meredith. This has been such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conversation. I know that people they had to get some value from it. If you did not get value from it, you may have gotten a little distracted yourself and missed out on a couple things, a couple things we said. So you might need to go ahead and watch a little piece of it again. But so much great stuff. Is there any would you like to kind of just bring it home with any like gold nuggets from this conversation? Like any just two key things that people should remember from this conversation?
I think one really important point I'd like to make is that we can give you all of these tips and tricks as ADHD coaches, as people that are talking in this space, but it's very common when you are first diagnosed with ADHD, if you're diagnosed as an adult, that you might not trust yourself enough to even use these tools. So before you work on employing a new strategy or trying something new, work on rebuilding that self-trust. Because you're using a different rule book now, and the rules are going to work differently for you. But you got to believe that it can change and that it can get better first.
Yes. Okay. Well, you know what? That right there was worth the whole conversation because it's so important. It's so important for people to be able to do that. Oh my goodness. Again, thank you so much for visiting with me today and sharing your wonderful wisdom. I know you have more, but not everybody has hours to listen to us. So can you tell my audience how do they reach you? What's the best way to get in contact with you? And maybe even take advantage of your services.
Yeah, I always keep my Instagram up to date, the link in my bio with what I am offering. That's a good place to start. I do try to catch as many direct messages off of Instagram as possible. Sometimes they filter them weird. So if you have been asking me a question I've never answered you, please try again. That's usually the best way to reach me. You can also go to my website is meredithcarder.com. Carter is spelled CARD as in dog, ER though. So there's also a link to email if you have something really specific and you haven't been able to reach me otherwise. And then if you're newer to ADHD or you're just really diving into learning more about it, my book is a really great resource as well.
Yes. Now, what's the name of your book again?
It all makes sense now.
It all makes sense now. And guys, we're going to have also all of that in our show notes. So if there's something that you maybe forgot, you can find it there. All right. Thank you so much for visiting with me. I appreciate you so much. And for all of you out there, keep in mind that it's not about the hand you're dealt, it's about how you play it. Have an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll see you again soon. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. And if you're interested in learning more about playing the hand you're dealt in this mental game of life, you'll love my book, Poker, a Woman's Game. To download your free chapter today, click on the link in our show notes or visit lafayawaypoker.com. See you soon.